Yeah, now it's fine.
Okay, great. So Martha, thank you so much for being here, and we are glad to have you. So can you please start with, yeah, I can see you now. Great. So thank you so much for being here. And you can start your presentation now by sharing your screen. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay, good.
Okay, good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. So the topic of my presentation will be to have a global overview of about this topic of the uncovering mystery of patient centricity in clinical trials, and particularly share with you some of the projects and learnings that we are gathering at Servier about this topic. So yes, as a small introduction, as you know, the patient engagement and patient centricity in clinical, I would say, research and clinical development is really an evolving process. It started more than 20 years ago. I think basically it is important to acknowledge that it was driven by the patients at the time of the AIDS crisis, and also, I would say, little by little, regulatory agencies and also people involved in research as the academia and the industry, we have embraced this, I would say, new way of working. This is just an example of what has happened at the level of the EMA. And if we say where we are now, I think that we have gained a lot of experience in the different areas. Patient engagement is far to be systematic because there is a lot of difference across agencies, about industries, about partners. But I would say that now we have gathered enough experience. We know things that are working well. We have a lot of learnings, and I think that probably is now the moment to turn into something more systematic. Where to engage with patients across the life cycle of any drug. Here you have the summary, and I would say that there is a lot of opportunities, and I don't see any single moment that we cannot do something with patients. I will focus my talk about the discovery and the clinical development. That is the scope of my work, but there is also a lot of opportunities in terms of marketing, pricing, reimbursement, and even post-marketing. So if we go to the discovery at the clinical development, I consider that is particularly important because it's at the moment that we generate the new drugs. So if we don't consult with the patients at that moment, perhaps after could be a bit later in terms of being able to generate a good and useful drug for everyone. So going now into a bit more of details of this part of the life of a product, that is the research and clinical, early research and clinical research. In terms of patient engagement, there is a huge difference. And something we put that together, and when we work with teams, we see that we cannot apply the same way of working and even the same projects. So in summary, when we compare the preclinical research and the clinical research, first thing is a question of timing. When we are in the preclinical research, we are talking about years before a product is going to be tested and to be tried with patients and used in clinical trials. There is a huge, and for not saying only high, attrition rates, a lot of unknowns about the product. The environment is even more than medical, is very scientific and very technical. We use animal models, cells, and the tissue models. And the professions involved are basically pharmacologists, chemistry, and geneticians. And the time constraints are particularly important because those teams, they need to provide a very quick answer to a lot of questions before going to work with this product with patients. When we are in the clinical research, we have at that moment, there is a lot of unknowns still, but we have a lot of information about the product. Often we know quite well the mechanism of action, even we have a clear idea of the indication, and the patients, what is very important, they're at the center of the study. We have a clear definition about the product, and the professions involved are also different because we work a lot. We are doctors, pharmacists, nurses, professions that they're used to work with patients. So for them, it's easier to work with them. And the main question is not why we do that, is basically when we have to do that and how we need to do that. So coming back to the early research, because it's the area that probably we need to progress more in the coming years, the question that is coming very often from the teams is why we need to work with patients if we are just working with animals. So we think that it's very important for those teams to really understand the meaning of living with a condition. It's also a way to provide them the opportunity to work on pharmacological targets that they may address a neglected symptom. If we are working on a particular disease and all the drugs are treating a symptom, we can be in front of something that is neglected. And if we discover that through the patients, we have the option to work on that. It is important for them to understand the treatment expectations of the patients compared with the reality. Is that the moment when we talk about and we work on the galenic forms, the administration patterns and the pharmacological interactions. So unless we have the feedback from the patients at that moment, otherwise could be very late and we can even take a wrong decision. Also is the moment of the early research when we work a lot with the genetic data, and obviously the patients are essential about that. And we explore at a very early stage the acceptability and all the safety issues. So as you can see here, there is a lot of questions and issues that need to be discussed with patients at a very early stage. However, the level of experience is still quite limited, and in this publication that is quite recent, this is a summary of the studies that has been identified working on early research and including a patient consultation. It doesn't mean that it's all, because unfortunately sometimes we work on projects and not everything is published for different reasons, but that can give us information of the number of studies, but it's very limited. It's only 32. Most of the experience is generated in the UK and the US, and there are different areas of work. It includes both in vivo and in vitro studies, and the stakeholders, I would say, they're basically the same that we involve when we are working on clinical research. But the main information about that is that it is still quite limited, and the number of publications is low, so it is more difficult to progress on that topic. So trying to identify the reasons, we have seen that is important, but there is not a lot of experience. I think that the main challenge can be divided into three. There are the worries from the teams, barriers, and real, I would say, difficulties. In terms of worries, obviously there is always the possible impact of working with patients on the project timelines, particularly because we are working with teams that they are not familiar with this way of working. The high attrition rate sometimes creates a lot of worries, because obviously, and I think that has a lot of sense, teams or we are a bit afraid to create an expectation in a patient community that after will not be transformed into a project, as we know that there is a high attrition rate. To give an answer to that, I think that we need to be very transparent with the patients. We say that, and at least in our experience, is working very well. They know that they are facing really a project with a high attrition rate and a higher level of risk. And also is how to integrate the patient's comment in a project is something that is very new, and there is some worries about that. After, we can identify some barriers, and it's really the interest of patient engagement on early research. Again, it's something new. They are not familiar with that. There is a certain lack of experience. We have seen that the number of publications is very limited, so that means that there is not a lot of experience in the field, and obviously there is a need of resources. And to finalize, there is perhaps some real difficulties, and one of them is the patient selection. Because we are working in this early environment, we are working with cells, with animal models, we need to have a good patient selection and identify a patient group that would be interested of that, and also to provide a project that is going to have an additional value for the patient community. Patient training, sometimes we need to train the patients for that, just to make sure that we are going to have a project of interest for all, and obviously with a reasonable outcome for both parties. and the selection of relevant topics that need to discuss with all the stakeholders. Sometimes teams, I think, if we work with cells, is it going to be relevant for the patients? My recommendation is always, yes, try. You will be surprised with the level of knowledge they have, the patient community, and what they can provide about this. When we move to the clinical research, the environment is completely different. And then the question is more about when to do that and how to do that. Obviously, the main point is to have a good understanding of the project development phase, because the questions are very different if we are in phase 1 or if we are in a late phase 3. We need to work about the study design, the PROs, very important, the patient study support. I think that some of the speakers, they mentioned that earlier on this morning, a lot of documents that can be co-developed with the patients, and also a lot of aspect about the recruitment. The patient community can be very, very useful to understand and to improve the recruitment of the clinical trials. So one of the main topics that we work when we are in this clinical phase is really to work on the study adaptation to patient expectations, and I would say also patient needs. So there is a lot of topics to discuss about the protocol design. So the first thing, and I think very important, is to share the objectives. If we want to have a fruitful collaboration with a patient community, we need to share the objectives. And they need to understand that. And again, my experience is that when this is clear, it's very easy to work. If we are at the early phase 2, they need to understand the issues that we have in terms of efficacy, safety, all the exploratory items that we have in the trial, the study plan, the feasibility for them, the visit content. This is critical for the patients because they need to spend a lot of time of each visit. So they need to have a good understanding of why we are doing that and why some of the tests are required. And after, we can discuss with them the interest and how to implement that. Obviously, everything about logistic and impact on the daily life. The process of consent, it is particularly important because it's a crucial for the patient recruitment, but it's extremely important for them because it's at the moment that they take the decision, yes, I want to be involved in a trial or not. So the impact from the patient community to make sure that we have a good consent, a good document, and even a good process, it is crucial. So for instance, they always give a very good information about the level of information that we need to provide, the language, to be very clear about the study interest, diversity has to be a consent that is understood by every patient included in the trial. We have also a lot of ideas from them about how to improve the study access. It's also very useful to speed that regulatory process. It is highly valued by the ethics committee to know that we have worked with a patient community in this document. And obviously, we have the experience that we increase the adherence to the study. When the patients are well informed, they understood what they are going to do. And after, obviously, all the rest of the process is really smooth. And also at the end, it is very important to gather the patient experience. Sometimes when we finish the trial, we go to the analysis of the data. But for the patient, it's very important they finish something that has been very important in their lives with a lot of visits, and after they come back to the regular care. So it's very important to gather their experience. It's also a way to recognize the value of their opinion. We have the impression that it's very rewarding. We can improve the study quality for the future. We can also obtain information about what is happening at the sites, and we can improve also the work of the clinical sites, and it's also a way to measure the satisfaction with the study. In terms of how to interact with the patients, I think that is very important for all of us, and some of my colleagues mentioned that before, that we need to include the new habits of the communities in our clinical trials. So this is just to share with you, and I think that you're familiar with that, the increased use of technology. So we need to ensure that we match our trials with the use of the technology that the patients and ourselves we are using in our daily life. And we know that one of the highest items that the patients that we are all visiting on internet and using the technology is about health. So we need to ensure that our trials now they are answering to these new ways of using the technology. So here you have some of the samples of things that we are currently implemented in our trials. So I would say that it's almost standardized in our process to have a discussion about the patient information sheet with the different patient groups. Sometimes we go, it depends on the size of the trial. We have always a consultation with a global group, and after we strongly recommend to our local teams to make sure that this document is also well adapted to their countries. We develop also patient support materials that could be brochures to go, for example, with long trials. We develop visuals well adapted when we are working with children, and we engage with the patients to produce this material. We have tried also to improve the logistic support to facilitate the study, and we are now in a project of moving to hybrid trials. And at this moment, we have an open project, an open consultation in 2 countries to understand the level of acceptance of the hybrid trials, and particularly to detect the pain points of the process to try to improve our future model. And also, we include, it's almost systematic in all the trials, a questionnaire at the end of the trial to gather the patient participation feedback. We don't address clinical issues because those are included as a PROs in the trial. It's basically questions about their experience in the trial and things that they would like to improve. This is particularly important when we are in the phase 2, because we will move eventually to the phase 3, and all these learning are important to implement in the future development of the studies. I just wanted to share with you something that we did, and it was with the NIHR that was presented before by Tio. And this is the outcome of a project. In that case, is the shown. So this is public. You can visit that. So we engage with a patient community. In that case, we use the support of the NIHR, and we discuss our study. We discuss after with some of them our consent. So we use this group of people to help us to construct the protocol. So the outcome of this consultation has been very important because we adapted our protocol. Particularly, there was a lot of questions about the test and how to manage that, and we modify our initial protocol. We have also implemented some technological platform to help the patients to work on that, also to help the sites. So we have really transformed our initial project to our current one, thanks to the collaboration with this patient group at an early stage. We were, obviously at that moment, the protocol was not finalized, otherwise we will not have any sense. So it was done at the right moment. We had a clear idea of our objectives, and we still have time enough to implement and to adapt their comments. This is another example. This is not coming from our company, but I thought that it's always important to share good examples. And this is coming from a study on breast cancer. It was a study with a lot of biopsies, and the biopsies are always very challenging for the patients. So what they did in this study is to identify the topics about the biopsies that they were likely to be accepted and those that were less likely to be accepted, and to modify the trial, taking that into account. I think that what is important is to take into account that when patients understand why they are doing things, the things are clearly explained, and they have the feeling that we are adapting also our process to align with their needs. There is always, the project is easier, and we have more chances to have patients involved in the trial and accepted what we are requesting. And we have recently performed this a retro analysis of the number of patients accepting multiplex biopsies, and we have very different results. And the common thing has been always the same. When the explanations were clear and they understood what was requested, we have more patients accepting that. However, in other cases, we can find, and this is really an issue, only 20% of patients accepting a biopsy, and this is really a challenge for the study. So at the end of the study, there is also a lot of things that are important to implement. So this is just to share with you what we are doing. So we have a website in which we publish. We have a publication of a lay summary of all the interventional trials. In the same website, there is always a clear explanation of what is a clinical trial. We disclose all the information about our studies. For example, this lay summary, it is co-developed with a patient group, with different patient groups. In the future, we would like to progress on the lay protocols and publications, again, co-developed with patients. And we have now an open topic that is quite challenging, that is how to manage the data return to patients, particularly when we are working on genetics. The regulations, they're not always very clear, and this is an ongoing topic that we have a lot of energy and a lot of people are working on this. So now I would like to share with you how we have progressed on that in the company. So because all that requires a lot of adaptation and a lot of involvement of the different teams. So the first point is really to have a very good knowledge of the process of research of development. So for the teams working on that, sometimes we have a partial view of one particular process, so it is just impossible to include and to embark on a patient engagement new process if we don't have this clear view. We need to understand the different questions that they are raised at different moments, and because that's the best way to identify at which moment of the process it will be more useful to have a collaboration with patients. After, we need to have, and this is essential, to have an internal alignment of the different teams. So important to have a transversal expertise, to have a look of the benchmark, and also to implement some training, particularly with the teams that they are not used to work with patients. And when all this work it is completed, we have to implement new tools. And obviously with the tools, we need to have a good follow-up and feedback. So now we are, for example, including this patient engagement process in a new tool that is managing all the clinical trials. So we have identified the steps, and now we have updated and modified our process. This is important to make sure that we have a meaningful and effective patient engagement. So there are some of the steps that we are following, and this is coming from a publication, but we have adapted that in our company. So one of the first things is really to decide why the patients have to be involved in our research projects. After, we need to identify the best patient community. And when this community is identified, we need to discuss with them about the roles, responsibilities, and expectations. The expectations from the patients and the expectations from our internal teams. And after, we need to discuss also and to agree how we are going to communicate and how we are going to integrate the recommendations, the comments from the patients on our process. So this is something that is applicable whether we are working on preclinical research or when we are working on clinical research. But to follow these steps are really important to make sure that all the company is moving in the same way and that we have a linear process of patient engagement. What we try to do is not to reinvent the wheel continuously and taking advantage of things that they are published and they're existing. So in that case, we have adapted some of the guidance on the toolbox proposed by PFMD. Some of the people of our group in the company, we have been involved in this group, and we thought that it was easy to follow. It has the endorsement of different groups and also a lot of patient groups. So it's something that has been, I would say, checked and is working quite well. And there is a lot of education about these tools, and it's a good way to embark particular teams that they don't have that experience. Another point that we stress very often is that to make sure that this patient engagement is meaningful, we need to do as early as possible. So sometimes when the engagement is coming really at the end, Even if the teams we need to do that, we need to make sure that it's still meaningful. So here you have a chart in which you can see the difference in terms of impact on the project when the patient engagement plan is done early compared with when this patient engagement is really done very late. So to make sure that the project is meaningful for the project has to be done very early. It has to be a real collaboration with the patient. Because when, however, is just a consultation when everything is basically done and is done very late, the impact on the project is very limited. And we can even consider not to decide not to do that. When all the steps are done, we have identified the community, we need to decide also what is going to be done. So there are different activities that can be implemented, and it's not always to take the right decision. What are we going to do? Are we going to implement telemedicine? We have seen some examples. We are going to move into the e-consent, etc. So this is a chart that can be adapted to any study, to any company, but is to consider the three main aspects, that are the cost of the project, the easiness, and the impact. So here you have a simple guidance about the level of impact, the cost, and the easiness. So in our case, what we try to recommend to the teams is particularly go, obviously, to the projects that are less expensive and they have a major impact. And in that case, obviously, it's a patient advisory board and a focus group. When I say that they are easy to implement, there is a lot of compliance aspect that they need to be considered. So again, it depends on the size of the company and the level of experience. But if it's the first time that a company is running a patient advisory group, they need to take time because they need to prepare contracts. They need to check that all the compliance is perfectly aligned. So it can take some time. But for example, here we can see other projects that they are very expensive, that is everything about the gaming, PROs, sometimes are difficult to implement, and the impact on the project sometimes is not so important unless something that could be obtained, but a gaming is going to be transformed in a very relevant PRO. So in that case, it could be justified. But generally speaking, we think that it's better to go to simple projects, gain experience, and only at that moment move into things that are a bit more expensive. And I just wanted to end my presentation saying that one of the perhaps most important aspects is that there is still a limited number of strong and good publications about the patient engagement. They're increasing, but to have this benchmark to align the way that we are working with the patients' communities is very important. So I think that it's very important to communicate, to share the best practice. We are not competitors in that respect. So to share what is happening and what is done with the patient community is very important. And also finally, it's very important to have this strong and robust level of publication also about this topic. So thank you very much, and happy to take any question you have.
Hi, Martha.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your wonderful session, and thank you so much for your time. And we have a question for you. It's from Natalie Ivanov, and she's congratulating you on incorporating patients' feedback in your process. And she's asking that what format do you use for engagement, meeting, workshop, or written feedback? Any recommendation for most efficient in time and quality relevance?
Okay. We have been using a lot of, I would say the most frequent has been really a workshop. So when it's possible, I'm trying to just keep from my memory. When we started, it was face-to-face workshop. So often there was one or two people from the, for the project. I was going myself, but also I used to bring some people. A couple of persons from the company, otherwise it could be overwhelming from the patient community. Now we are doing that virtual and it's still working very well. So I don't see, I didn't see any issue about that. And for example, for the consents, we gather written information. I have tried to do that also on meetings, even on the phone. The consents are very long. and it's a bit tedious for the patients and also for us to do like this. So for the consents, we use written information.
Okay. So, Martha, thank you so much for your wonderful session and for because your session was very interesting. People are very interested in your session and they're asking questions. And I'll ask them that if they have more questions, they can ask you in the QA session or in the chat session. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye. So, ladies and gentlemen, now our next presenter is Vladimir Anismov. He's with us. Let's welcome him. Hi, Vladimir. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay.
Can I start my video because you stopped it? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I will try. Okay.
Yeah. It's working now.
Yes. See me?
Yes, I can see you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Vladimir is working as a principal data scientist from Amgen, and Dr. Anismov is working in pharma industry since 2002, currently principal data scientist, Center for Design and Analysis, Amgen, based in London. And prior to this, he worked for GSK and Quintiles and led the development and implementation of the innovative statistical tools for clinical trials modeling, internationally recognized expert in this area. So it would be an honor to hear from him. Sorry. So Vladimir, you can start your presentation. Yeah, I can see your slides now.
Okay, thank you very much for introduction and inviting me for this conference. So I will talk really about different modern technology for forecasting, monitoring, and optimal designing, mainly clinical trial operation. And there is no need to talk really in this audience that late phase modern clinical trials are very complex, involve hundreds or sometimes thousands really patients to be recruited in different sites, and again, many sites in many countries. And therefore, we need to develop different innovative statistical and artificial intelligence technology to improve the efficiency of trial operation. And we need to know that patient recruitment is actually one of the main engines driving operation of clinical trials. And citing Ken Getz, director, Tufts Center for Study of Drug Development in the US, patient recruitment and retention are among the greatest challenges that the clinical research enterprises faces today, and they are a major cause of drug development delays. However, it's even surprising that sometimes companies still use different ad hoc, simplified, or even deterministic models. For example, simplified deterministic model in particular country to recruit 5 patients per each month, five linear line in different countries. You have different linear lines. It creates global prediction, but definitely this simplified prediction may lead to inefficient design. Of course, we cannot predict different stochastic characteristics. For example, predict probability of success to complete a particular deadline. And still about 23% of trials fail to recruit in time. However, is of course much better than 10 years ago, according to Tufts report. And the talk will be devoted to the main different areas. First, technologies to maximize patient recruitment predictability, then optimal cost-efficient design of recruitment, including site country selection, then at interim stage, reprojection and optimal adjustment of recruitment. Correspondingly, it will be a related topic, risk-based monitoring and forecasting future trial performance, and also a couple of slides related to forecasting some operational characteristics, specifically event counts in oncology. For recruitment modeling, we already developed analytic data-driven methodology, which is defined in the following way. We assume that patients arrive at clinical trials, at clinical sites, according to stochastic Poisson flows. And because sites, of course, are different, have different capacity, whatever, recruitment rates vary, and variation is modeled according to gamma distribution. And also sites can be initiated at different times, which also can be uncertain. And the beauty of this methodology is that it's possible to develop closed form expressions for the main predictive characteristics. That means we don't need Monte Carlo simulation, and all calculation takes invisible time. And this methodology is worldwide accepted, known as the Poisson gamma model, published in top statistical journals, presented at major conferences. And the basic paper about this methodology already reached 135 Google Scholar citations. Developed methodology and related software tool allow the following major features. First, of course, this is predicting recruitment over time on different levels with mean and predictive bounds. Correspondingly, it can be predicted time to reach recruitment target and also probability of success to complete before deadline with a given probability at different stages. It's interesting to note a special problem, which actually can be really, we can talk more about this, but this time for this talk is limited, how to evaluate recruitment rates for the future trials. And typically, people may use experience of study investigators, different so-called expert estimates, and correspondingly can be used historical data from historical trials. And in data science team Amgen, we use machine learning algorithms trained on large databases of historical studies provided by consortium of pharma companies using different features. Because of course we need to predict in future trials using similar trials in the past. It means study indication, site types, countries, whatever. And currently, in this consortium, there are 17 members of companies which allow to share, it's really not hundreds, but thousands of historical trials which allow huge opportunity for data science really to work with historical data and analyze different features for use for future prediction. So how it is working in reality, baseline recruitment prediction at the initial stage. So this is some real trial, some initial design for site initiation within the first 5 months, particular planned recruitment rates with mean and variance. And this is predictive area to reach deadline 222, sample size 222 patients. And this is prediction with mean, median, and the 90% bounds. And when this predictive area crosses target, then we have predictive interval. So correspondingly, we see that predictive interval is quite large, but this is real life, how it is going. And this is a very interesting picture showing predictive probability of success. That means probability to complete trial or complete recruitment up to particular time. For example, here, if you have planned time 15 months, then probability to complete before 15 months is only 0.365. That means it is visible that this design actually is not so efficient, and potentially to have higher probability, we need to improve the initial design. Similar predictions can be created on country level using newly developed approximation by Poisson gamma processes on country level in the paper which is recently published. Another interesting area, actually this is really new area, predicting recruitment with different restrictions, because according to different regulatory restrictions, definitely we should not allow that out of say 100 countries, 1, 2, or 3 of them will recruit most of the patients. Because for some obvious reasons, diversity, we should have diversity between patient populations, whatever. And this is one scenario when we have restrictive caps. That means in different countries, there are set caps. That means recruitment stop in this country when cap is reached. And it was developed also completely new analytic methodology. And this plot shows prediction of recruitment for some initial design of the caps. These caps are shown here by horizontal lines. And you see, really caps substantially slow down recruitment, because with time, caps in some countries will be reached, recruitment will be stopped there. However, if we increase initial caps on 200%, then this plot shows a new prediction where practical impact of caps is not visible. So there is slightly visible slowdown, but practically there is no influence of caps. And now we see that predictive interval is on average near planned recruitment time. Here, probability to complete in time is more than 50%. So it's very important to analyze at the initial design potential impacts of caps, because really non-efficient caps may substantially increase recruitment time, because here on average 14 months, it's really huge increase. If we will look now on optimal design of recruitment, specifically at the initial stage when we want to create a recruitment design for the new trial, the key questions here: how to increase predictability of recruitment, and which countries and how many sites to select there, which enrolls the fastest with minimal cost, and we want to get the desired probability of success. The developed tools, because they're analytic, allow to realize completely new paradigm, that we can plan recruitment with confidence. That means create design with, say, 80% chance to complete in time. Correspondingly, for any particular design, it can be evaluated probability of success. And if it's not that large, like on previous example, then design can be updated and we can calculate the optimal number of additional sites needed to reach a desired probability of success. And correspondingly, we can also create or solve the most important problem, cost-efficient recruitment design. That means if you have some particular planned number of countries, we need to find optimal geographic site allocation of sites among these countries, because it's really important to know that in different countries, sites may cost differently, initiation sites, and of course, enrollment patients also have different costs. That means it's really important optimal geographic site selection. And we want to have the selection which minimizes the total trial cost, given that we want to have probability to complete in time at least as a given probability, to say 80%. And of course, there are some restrictions on the number of sites in country, because we cannot allow, even in the very good countries, to have huge number of sites. Trial cost quite wide. It may include different parameters like cost per country involved, site initiation, patients, monitoring, etc. And clearly, calculation of optimal design may show that if you want to complete recruitment earlier, then trial costs will be more. And this is really another story, optimal decision making, which we provide to higher management, and they can decide really what might be more efficient, to complete earlier and pay more, or leave trial a bit longer, but it will cost less. And this really is very complicated mathematical problem to solve this optimal design allocation, which will depend really on different restrictions, so unrestricted enrollment, competitive, or enrollment with restrictions with caps. And we developed in data science Amgen a package and different analytic tools using different criteria of optimality. And actually, this is also ongoing work now, using nonlinear constraint optimization, new algorithms like genetic evolution, meta-heuristic optimization, and some results will appear soon. Now we are coming to interim stage, data-driven reprojection at interim stage using data, and also adaptive adjustment. At interim stage, actually, for predicting future recruitment, we need quite simple set of data. We need to know recruitment window for every site. That means duration of active enrollment here, and number of patients recruited. And of course, it can be some new sites to be initiated in the future, and we need to know schedule of the sites and expected rates. Methodology involving statistical analysis of data, estimation of parameters, then re-estimation of posterior rates in individual sites using Bayesian technique and site data. And also, if you have additional sites in the future, we can use expected rates in these new sites and create global projection of the recruitment. Correspondingly, when calculated probability of success is not that large, then we can calculate how many additional sites is required to add to reach a desired probability of success. And this is artificial, but I think quite illustrative scenario. So this is initial design of recruitment for some particular scenario, 400 patients, 70 sites, 1 year planned time. And then we see that initial prediction is created with 90% confidence because predictive interval is to the left of 1 year. And assume now that real recruitment is going slower than expected. That means if you now predict from here, we will go far beyond 1 year. Then at this point, we can use data and calculate how many additional sites to add to return on track recruitment. And for this scenario, it was calculated that we need 22 new sites according to a given schedule. It was 5 new sites in each month. And now adjusted recruitment is going in time. So this is the way really how it is working. Another area, quite hot, really an important area, which again, there are many publications for different ways of monitoring, risk-based statistical monitoring of different characteristics. And I will talk specifically about monitoring of recruitment. And of course, as we have methodology for modeling recruitment, this is underlying methodology for this technique, but of course, there were developed some additional developments on this phase. And this newly developed methodology allows first detect low and high enrolling sites, correspondingly country and regions, also low active at particular time and dormant sites. And it can be used different types of detection and visualization. It can be used like statistical notion of p-values. It can be p-values upper to detect high enrolling sites and low p-values to detect low enrolling. And also 2D classification, which is published in our recent paper. This is a real study showing how centralized statistical monitoring is working. So here we have enrollment window and in minus log scale p-values. And for every site, we have 2 values. Upper p-value, red dot, and low p-value, blue dot. And the separation line, 5 and 10%. And correspondingly, as we have minus log scale, that means if dot is higher, original p-value is lower. So here we see that 6 sites with red dots have very low high p-value, and correspondingly they correspond to highly enrolling sites. And 1 site corresponds to unusually low enrolling sites. And this is same studies, exactly the same scenario, but visual 2D classification in the natural scale, enrollment window and number of patients. That means now every site is characterized by natural data. But again, we see here that 6 dots are above this separation line, and separation line corresponds to upper and lower quantiles, actually of a particular statistical model here, Poisson gamma model. And these quantiles are created for this study because they, of course, use estimated parameters for this data. Well, so again, we see same detection of high or low enrolling site, but using another type of classification. Same detection can be done on country level. Again, we see that one site, one country, for example, is unusually high enrolling and two unusually low enrolling. It can be also developed technique for monitoring other metrics. For example, forecasting future recruitment performance on different levels, also analyzing and assessment different characteristics. Actually, for this characteristic, we of course should develop particular technique depending on type of data. It can be screen failures, dropout, adverse events, and also dynamic prediction of some operational characteristic. For example, it's interesting that if you have some particular region, we can predict at interim time using data-driven approach the number of sites which will not recruit any patients in the future interval in this region, correspondingly number of highly enrolling sites, etc. And also monitoring different rates. And this is quite important slide for clinical teams predicting future sites performance. So we have real data here, enrollment window and number of enrolled patients here. And it is calculated for every particular site the following: probability not to recruit any patients in this site in the next 1 month, and probability to recruit at most two patients in the next 3 months. So correspondingly, if probability not to recruit in the next month is quite high, that means this site has really very low recruitment performance. And here we have 5 so low performing sites. And this is tool actually like indication and or alert study teams that potentially that they need to make some actions with the sites to decide really what to do. Maybe to make some manual intervention or maybe close some sites. Again, technique is analytic because if you want to calculate simultaneously in say 200 sites with this accuracy, these probabilities, it will require about 10 to the power 12 runs of Monte Carlo, which practically cannot be realized on usual computers. Well, it's also interesting that using stochastic model can explain so-called large heterogeneity of sites productivity in studies that have not so large recruitment rates. Because clinicians know, and people who work with large databases, for example, in oncology, that at the end, it can be about 20–30% of sites that enroll 0 patients. Then also about 20–25% of the most productive sites enroll about half of patients. And again, if you look on the impact of 50% of the most productive sites, they can enroll up to 80% of patients. And this is really not a result of inefficient planning, but a statistical law, which is confirmed by applying Poisson gamma model, but also these results were confirmed by empirical analysis of many trial databases. And when I presented this result at some conference, and it was also talked with similar numbers using the analysis of databases, they were really surprised that same results can be achieved using analytic modeling. And this is quite amazing, really, plot showing impact of the most productive sites for real trial, and blue, and theoretical curve calculated using real data, and this curve was adjusted to real data using estimated parameters. And again, we see that half of patients is recruited by about 22% of the most productive sites, and 80% of patients is recruited by about 50% of the most productive sites. So it's quite interesting, really. Another directions, which I will mention only briefly, are related to modeling different operational processes which are driven by patient recruitment. Because, for example, in longitudinal trials, oncology trials, each recruited patient actually generates some follow-up process with random lifetime, because patients are coming and then they are waiting future visits. It can be different events related to these patients, clinical, non-clinical, also associated costs. And the evolution of these processes together with recruitment creates so-called hierarchic evolving process, as I call them. And these results are published in different directions and developed for many practical situations. One direction, which may require really separate talk, this is predicting event counts in event-driven trials, like in oncology, accounting for dropout and also for opportunity of cure. And another direction, predicting different follow-up processes, visits, correspondingly related events and costs. And this is actually the last slide, the informative slide, showing real trial and opportunity of actually analysis of pre-enrollment stage together with event stage. So this was interim analysis at some initial point where we have at this stage that 227 patients were already recruited, particular number of sites were already, 52 events already happened. Target here, 336 events. And this is prediction in the case when recruitment after this point will continue 1 year. So we see that new patients are coming, of course, a number of events increasing with patients, but then when enrollment is stopped, then in general, trajectory of new events will be slowed down, and actually it will be huge, actually, predictive interval, and 1,300 in days on average to reach event target. But if at this stage we consider another design and recruitment will continue for 2 years, then of course we will recruit more patients. They may generate much more events. And we see that now for 2 years, actually, where is this, 700 with something, we even do not see slowdown like here trajectory of the events, and the target will be reached much faster, on average 550 days earlier. This is really amazing impact of duration of recruitment and show again opportunity that potentially we can combine recruitment and the stage with total planned duration of the study. Definitely it will involve another targets because to enroll patients more, we need to pay more, whatever. But again, this is another story. We need to discuss where to invest more. Conclusions that as we developed advanced analytic technology, they can perform a lot of exciting opportunities for patient recruitment, predicting at different stages, especially optimal designing, risk-based statistical monitoring, then future recruitment performance, and also forecasting different operational characteristics, more general, for example, event counts. And these results really published now. And these developed tools have a huge potential really for improving efficiency, maximizing clinical trial recruitment predictability, and trial operational design. These are some publications available by request. Thank you very much for your attention. Would be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Hi, Vladimir. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. Hear me?
Yes, I hear. Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. So, Vladimir, we have a question for you, and that is, if we are adding a new site to keep recruitment on track, are we taking into consideration the time it will take to prepare the site eligibility, visit site, reports, meeting with. This is a question in the QA session. If you want to answer him live, you can, or if you want to write the answer.
Yes, I will answer. Of course, we need to know, as I told, schedule of new sites initiation. By schedule, actually, for predicting recruitment, the main characteristic is when the site is available to start to recruit patients. And of course, it can be site preparation, whatever, but this can be included in so-called preliminary period. But for prediction, as I told, we need to know actually the date when site can start to enroll new patients. And that's it. Yeah. And
okay,
of course,
great.
And of course, planned recruitment rate, of course, which can be given from somewhere, historical data by study managers, whatever. Yes, thank you for the question.
Okay. Okay, great. So thank you so much for answering my question, and thank you so much for your time and effort you took to share your expertise and for your stimulating presentation. And we are looking forward to work again with you. I'll ask the audience that if they have any questions, they can ask you in the QA session or in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Stay. Thank you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, hope you have enjoyed the presentation of Vladimir. And now our next presenter is Lucia Merit. She is here with us. Hi, Lucia, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
That's great. Okay, so Lucia, thank you so much for being here. And we are glad to have you here as a keynote speaker. And thank you for adding value in our conference. So ladies and gentlemen, this is Lucia Merit. She is working as a manager patient support program at Alliance Healthcare. And she's having 3 years of experience in life science strategy consulting at EY and master's in pharmaceutical marketing. She's specialized in market access by EADA Business School licensed nurse by Barcelona University. So it will be a pleasure to hear from her and to learn some new ideas from our side. So Lucia, you can start your presentation by sharing your screen.
Perfect, thank you. Please let me know when you can see it. Sure. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see it now, but I think there is some issue on your side, maybe. Yeah, it's blinking. Yeah, it's working now properly. So okay. You can start your presentation. Good luck. Stage is all yours now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So hello everyone. Thank you for being here in this session. As the presentation has been done, but just a brief recap. So my name is Lucia Merit. I'm currently working as PSP managers in Alcura Alliance Healthcare that has recently acquired by Merces Bergen. So the agenda for today will be divided in 3 blocks. First of all, we're gonna see a general overview of the current landscape of patient support programs and see how they have gained relevance in the current landscape. Our second block will be based on the different overview and different types of patient programs or patient solutions. So when I'm talking of patient programs, I will also name it by patient solutions, and a bit deep dive more in a proposal of patient programs in clinical trials. And at last but not least, we will talk about the benefits and challenges of including patient solutions in clinical trials. So let's start. So starting with a general overview, we all know that there is an increasing trend towards patient centricity. So that during the last few years, we have seen and been more conscious of the number of unmet needs unresolved during all the patient journey. Of course, the focus of resolving those unmet needs have been usually been in the phase of diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up. But it has been highlighted the importance of engaging patients in the early stages, including all the real and research and development phase. All this together with the effects of the COVID pandemic, the importance of prevention in the healthcare system, and the current patient-centric approach demands an introduction of innovative solutions that have been led through patient support programs, real-world evidence, digital health, or innovative selling schemes. Of course, in this session we will talk more about the patient support programs. However, all these three topics are also very common and could also be complementing these patient support programs. So, as we were saying before, the patient demands to be in the center. The definition of comprehensive patient programs or solutions should begin always by analyzing correctly patient unmet needs and defining the problem definition in a very accurate way, so we can identify where of the patient journey we need to add some value. Once we have this clear, patient solutions should have three kind of characteristics. So first of all, should be integrated with care services, considering holistic patient vision. Then they should ensure personalized health to enable a better understanding of the patient experience. And then the third point, I would say that could be patient engagement. So to then ensure a better understanding of their needs or requests. From these patient solutions, real-world evidence can be generated. Collection of patient data and insights should allow an improvement of care and treatment. And we could deep dive then in the particularities of the patient, of the treatment, and enable a right treatment and improve all the outcomes. So we could build an integrated patient journey. All this leads to value-based healthcare. So we all know also that the healthcare system is focused on adding value to the patient. How we can do that? So integration capabilities and service across the healthcare value chain. Also ensuring fluent and efficient coordination, eliminating all the inefficiencies, and leverage data to show an improvement of patient quality of life and optimization of resources. So there are many types of patient programs in the market, and I have grouped them into three. So this is based on our research, okay? It's not exhaustive. Anyway, we are talking about both investigational and commercializational drugs. So these patient support programs, we have the most common, which are technology-enabled engagement, which allows patient identification, so the enrollment of these patients into the clinical trials, regardless their location, gender, or socioeconomic background. Also, data collection and analysis, so patients can track their symptoms and treatment adherence, continuous data reporting, and to generate more data, and patient self-management, which allows patient empowerment by giving them a better control on their disease and also by improving their adherence. At last, we have the remote communication, which would be one-to-one support with HCPs that enables patients to receive a personalized care and a faster response to their doubts. All this type of patient support programs could be done or performed by personalized remote support, medication reminder, therapy diary, remote monitoring, monitoring apps and wearables, and smart charge bin. Sorry. Also, we have the education and counseling patient support programs. So in this type of programs, they are focused on providing patients with the right resources to help them to understand proactively communicate their needs. So also they could train, they could be focused on training patients in self-administration and provide more information about the possible adverse events. The last point would be online motivational sessions to ensure patient empowerment and help them to be more self-confident with their disease management. So this education and counseling could be done by online training sessions or providing educational materials. And the last one, we could say that is clinical support and intervention, that I would say that it's increasing right now. That would be all regarding nurse and direct assessment regarding the treatment and motivational interviews, and help patients and HCPs to feel more confident on transitioning from a clinical-driven infusion to a whole self-infusion. Also, it could be performed to monitor adverse events and to follow up patient adherence through nurse visits. Home delivery services also can be complemented with in-home nurse visits. So as I said, this type of services could be done by home delivery and travel lead services, home care service, or starter kits, and nurse services. There's a fourth type of patient support program, which is not included here, which would be only for drugs which are already in the market, that is focused on facilitating the access to the patient to the medication. So patients who cannot afford paying the treatment would be supported by this support program. Okay, so a bit deep diving on R&D or clinical trials patient support programs, we could say that there are relevant differences, as most of patient support programs are developed in the commercialization stage. However, as multiple benefits have been shown due to the earliest engagement of the patient, there is a trend towards allocating all the resources in clinical phases. The most common ones are technology-enabled engagement with data collection and insights analysis, patient identification, patient self-management, and remote communication. There's also a type or different types of clinical support and intervention programs. Besides, in the commercialization phase, the most common of patient support programs are the education and counseling, which is performed during the diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up. Also, technology-enabled engagement is performed here, but the most common one is the patient self-management and clinical support and intervention at the last time. Then we could say that the common therapeutic areas for including patient programs would be oncology, cardiovascular diseases, and autoimmune or rare disease, as there is a huge innovation in this area. So holistic patient solutions in clinical trials could be grouped in home trial support, together with a call center focused on improved patient experience and quality of life. So this would ensure patient centricity during the clinical trial and add value also to the patient. Of course, these two types of patient support programs could be defined in different ways depending on their requirements, and it would probably need to be complemented by digital solutions. Okay, so I'm just here writing some examples of how these two patient support programs could be settled on. So first of all, we have the home trial support that could be described by home care services delivered by a licensed and trained nurse with the objective of enhancing patient empowerment. So there are some activities that could be performed, such as patient assessment or home infusion, training sessions for patient self-administrations, also nurse visits to control vital signs, adverse events, concomitant medication, or perform spirometries or other tests required. And in the last point, we would have follow up the treatment adherence and conducting pharmacovigilance in coordination with a call center, for example. So here the other program would say there's we'll call it call center service, which would be a hotline service for patient support and managed by trained HCPs that could be nurses, pharmacists, depending on the drug requirements. So the call center service could be focused on support on job solutions and information transmission to the patient, coordination of the different services offered to patients, also conduct pharmacovigilance and monitoring, reinforce patients' motivations through motivational interviews and coaching, and also by developing questionnaires to measure adherence level, patient satisfactions, as well as collect and capture patient insights and perceptions regarding the study. In line with these two types of patient programs, we could also talk about direct-to-patient model, which I think that it could bring a lot of value to patients. Probably you will know about it. It consists in a type of decentralized trial that allows the study medication to be received and administered in patients' homes rather than clinical sites. And there is an increasing trend towards this drug supply model in the recent years. I won't go into detail of these types of model. Summarizing everything, we would say we have the site pharmacy to patients' homes and the depot to patients' home, and the hybrid model that combines direct-to-patient model with traditional site visits. This type of the program, patient program, could be also complemented with the call center and home support. But we need to take in mind some considerations about this model. So it is key to ensure the coordination and communication of all the stakeholders involved in the process. So the distributors, hospital pharmacies, the patient, the HCPs. Also, we will probably need a robust technology-enabled engagement program, such, for example, as CRM platforms that will be crucial in order to manage all the data regarding the patient and the shipment. But we have to take in mind, it's very important, that each model has to be personalized considering legal and regulatory aspects of each country, such, for example, as data protection, country-specific applicable legislation, etc. Of course, the process has to guarantee the traceability and security of IMP. And direct-to-patient would be complemented, as I said before, with in-home nurse visits or assessment for assessment or infusion at home if it's required. So, sorry. So here we have some data published by the Center of Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, that we can see some of the factors that more influences patients when deciding to participate in the study. So in the right side of the column, we have the percentage rate given to each factor. Some of them are highlighted, and they could be overcome by introducing the right patient program. For example, by explaining and giving more information about the potential risks and benefits to the patient, and giving support during all the phases of the clinical trial. This would be one way. Another way, for example, if we're talking about the duration of each study visit, or the number of study visits, or the length of participation in the clinical research study, here we could say that there are some enablers that could be a patient direct-to-patient model, or maybe home support for the patient, so that would be easy for them to enroll to the clinical trial. And at last but not least, I would like to talk about the benefits and challenges that of implementing patient support programs in the landscape of clinical trials. So we all know that multiple stakeholders could be benefited from including these patient programs, and we will have a more patient-centric approach. However, there are some challenges which are not all in here, but that are needed to be considered. So some benefits would be could be summarizing in these 4 points. So, for instance, first of all, we will have enhancing patient recruitment and retention. So we all know that the patient recruitment and retention are both key factors for a clinical trial success. However, there is often a delay in timelines, and the drop rates could be very high. So this could be resolved by introducing and defining a patient program focused on informing and supporting patients with their doubts, for example, a call center. Also, direct-to-patient model could improve recruitment by doing it faster. Ensuring also would ensure the patient diversity in the study and reduce time to market of IMPs. Another benefit would be improving patient empowerment and adherence. So adherence is a quite important factor for the success of the study, and through a home trial support and a hotline services, patients could increase their self-confidence and be more involved in the disease. Consequently, they will be more adherent to the treatment. Disease awareness is not really the matter of this session, but of course, with this kind of patient support programs could be enhanced, and also would help to make patients more aware about the treatment alternatives. Then we would have boosting patient insights and perceptions inclusion. So as we were talking at the very beginning of the presentation, generation of data, of reliable data of the patient could be enhanced by including patient support programs. So then we would assure that all the patient participation would be in the earliest phases of the creation of the drug. Also, we would encourage all data collection to generate more robust real-world evidence. And at last, we will be optimizing resources. So the reduction, for example, of unnecessary visits or interruption of treatments, and different cost savings for the patient. For example, travel or visit times. But also we will have cost savings for the whole healthcare system. For example, less amount of patient at sites, or less queues, by introducing this type of direct-to-patient model or maybe home trial support. On the other hand, we'll have the main challenges. So as I said before, we have here 4 main challenges, but of course, we should be exploring more detail for each of the patient support program, and depending on the clinical trial, which challenges we will find here. So first of all, I think that we are all aware of that. So we have data protection. So patient data protection management is key, a key aspect to consider for the successful implementation of an innovative patient solution. Additional to that, we should say that there are different legislation depending on the region. So also it has to be explored depending on that. Technology investment is the second main challenge, as most of the patient support programs would need to be complemented with a robust digital platform in order to coordinate and ensure optimal communication of the different stakeholders involved. The third point would be country-specific regulation. So depending on the country, regulation may vary widely. So also different institutions can be involved, and it's important to explore if the patient program is feasible and viable for each of the studies. And at last but not least, it's important to know the willingness of implementing this patient solution. So some agents could be more reluctant to introduce these patient solutions due to the loss of control of the patient, maybe, or because it's at home, for example. Therefore, it's key to enhance the benefits for the patient, not only for the patient, but also for them, as well as ensure their participation during all the process. So I think that from my side, it's all. So thank you for your time. I don't know if there's any question.
Hi, Lucia. Thank you so much for your interesting session. And I'll ask the audience that if they have any question, they can ask you in the QA session or in the chat. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much for being here and adding value in our conference. We are honored to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. Okay, so hope you have enjoyed the presentation of Lucia. It was a very interesting session. And now our next presenter is Trishna Bharatiya. She's here with us. Hi, Trishna, how are you?
Hi.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You just need to unmute yourself again.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you now. How are you?
Fabulous. I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good too. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this is Trishna Bharatiya. She is a health advocate and patient engagement at the Spark Global. And she is a multi-award winning health advocate and patient engagement consultant. She works with multiple stakeholders in the life sciences and healthcare industries to better embed the patient voice in all that they do. She has over a decade of experience in this area, and awards include being given honorary membership of the UK's Faculty of Pharmaceutical Medicine, a part of the Royal College of Physicians, as well as being recognized by the UK Prime Minister's Office with a Point of Light Award for her work with patient communities. So it would be an honor and to listen from her. And so thank you so much for joining us, Trishna.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay, so shall I start your presentation now?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this session. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity Is it working? Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this session. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to talk to you all about putting patients.
Now, and I can
Yeah,
see
are you
your
able
screen.
to see that? So shall
Yeah.
I can share from mine then?
Yes, yes,
Yep.
that's right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this session. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to talk to you all about putting patients at the heart of clinical trials and the clinical research process. This is something that I'm extraordinarily passionate about, so I'm looking forward to talking about it in this session. Just some background about who I am and what I do. I'm a health advocate and patient engagement advisor and founder of the Spark Global, a patient engagement and advocacy consultancy. My name is Trishna Bharatiya, and I've worked in this space for over 10 years, following a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis back in 2008. I'm based in the UK, but I work nationally and internationally with multiple stakeholders in the healthcare and life sciences industries. So that includes pharma, vendors, CROs, clinicians, and also patient organisations. And I work to get the patient voice embedded throughout the healthcare journey and medicine's development life cycle. This includes consultancy work, including on good patient engagement practices, diversity in healthcare, and patient-focused projects. I also do media outreach, so sharing expert opinion and patient experience on TV, radio, and in the press. I also write for a number of publications and platforms, and I'm currently the patient engagement workstream editor for the Drug Information Association's Global Forum magazine. I also co-create content, information, and services ranging from disease awareness campaigns to patient-facing materials to patient support tools. Additionally, I hold a number of voluntary positions at health and disability related organisations, including ADD International and the MS Society in the UK. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email if you'd like to find out more. So what are we going to be looking at today? What are we going to be exploring? Well, firstly, we'll explore the changing patient landscape. What do we mean by the patient voice, and who are the patients? And then we'll look at some of the areas in which patients can be and should be getting involved along the medicine's development life cycle. We'll also look at good patient engagement practices and where to find patients to involve them in patient partnerships. And finally, we'll look at patient-centered trials and what do they look like, specifically decentralization and diversity and inclusion. So we've got a lot to get through today. So it's well known now that patient partnerships in the medicine's development life cycle are crucial for creating more relevant, appropriate, and targeted treatments. In fact, compared with drugs developed in standard phase 2 and 3 trials, those developed using patient-centric trials have been shown to be 19% more likely to launch and be adopted by payers. It's clear that patient involvement in drug development is no longer a nice to have, but it's a critical part of the process. When we talk about patient-centeredness, it's important to recognise that the patient landscape is changing, and not all patients and caregivers can be viewed as one and the same. Where they sit in this pyramid impacts their ability to contribute to healthcare and how and in what industry partners with them. So first we have the patient by experience, which is the majority of people who live with a health condition. They're experts in their own experience of their condition and might be informed enough to manage their condition day to day, or maybe they're not really informed at all and they're just doing what their doctor tells them to do. And then you have the expert patient. Now they're highly informed and experienced not only in their own experience of their condition, but also of others living with the same illness and their wider patient community. They often advocate for their community and they're taking an increasingly active role in their own healthcare. And then you have what is increasingly being known as the professional patient. Now, these are patients who are highly skilled, highly knowledgeable, and they're experienced not just in their own condition, but in many conditions and patient issues. Now, these issues could be things like patient engagement, digital literacy, health inequalities, diversity and inclusion. These patients also have wide networks with various stakeholders, and they're looking to address, as I said, those broader issues affecting many patient communities. Now, as you can see from the pyramid, as you go up each level, the skills, experience, expertise, and breadth of knowledge increases. So it is possible for someone to move between the levels or for someone to be more than one type of patient. Plus, we now have the emergence of patient influencers and patientpreneurs who can come from any of those other subgroups within the pyramid. Patient influencers are the leaders of the patient community who tend to be particularly active online, and they're considered influential and/or thought leaders. Patientpreneurs are people living with a condition who have been inspired to develop their own solutions and their own products for a health issue. And also, we can't forget patient groups. They form part of the patient voice. Patient groups and patient associations represent specific patient communities and should also be considered when designing patient-centered trials. But you do need to remember that engaging with a patient group isn't the same as engaging with individual patients. Engage with both as distinct stakeholders in the process. So now we know who the patients are. Why should they be placed at the heart of clinical trials? Why should industry be partnering with them? And at what points along that R&D continuum can they be involved? Well, I think it's now much more accepted that getting patients involved in the design of clinical trials will make medicines development more relevant and targeted. It can help recruitment and retention and can improve the patient experience. And then, as you can see from this diagram, the possibilities for patient involvement in R&D are vast. Patients can be involved from the very beginning all the way through to post-approval. It's not just about making sure that there aren't too many site visits or that informed consent is understandable. We can have patients involved in the various trial committees, post-study communications, and HTA. Now, I'm not going to go through each area on this slide. It's pretty self-explanatory and it's quite a busy slide. But it's important to remember that to have a more patient-centered trial, you should be looking at involving patients in majority, if not all of these areas, not just one or two, in order to say that you've asked a patient. And what I also want you to do is to start thinking about getting patients involved in the development of some of these areas. Now, what do I mean by this? Okay, for example, if you want to identify research priorities, if we go right to the very beginning of this diagram, setting of research priorities, partner with an advocate to help determine what is the best way to do that and have them involved in the execution. It really is time to start looking deeper into the patient involvement itself. So now we need to consider the how. How should industry be partnering with patients? This is really where we start to delve into good patient engagement practices. So firstly, the partnership needs to be relevant. Find appropriate tasks for patients to undertake and engage them at the appropriate time during the project life cycle. Engaging a patient for the sake of it really doesn't add value to whatever you're doing, nor does engaging them as a token gesture at the end to provide feedback and to say that you've ticked the patient engagement box. From the outset, think about every single point along the project timeline where patient involvement could happen. There's usually more than you think there might be. And then you need to be involving the right type of patient. Training can be provided if necessary, and the tasks need to be appropriate for the patient level, going back to that pyramid that we saw earlier. Okay, for example, I'm currently involved in a project that is looking into the use of patient-reported outcomes in clinical trials. The project is being led by a steering group. Now that steering group is suitable for patient experts and pro-patients at the top of that pyramid because of the depth of knowledge required about clinical trials, the patient community, and also healthcare systems. Also, PRO development is a complex topic, so a high level of health literacy is also needed. But insights are also being gathered from patients by experience via a survey that was co-created with the patient experts who are sitting on the steering committee. And insights are also being gathered from patient advocates through in-depth interviews. This shows just how within a single project, the appropriateness of tasks according to the patient level becomes really important. And then next we have value. Patients need to be valued. Now this is always somewhat of a difficult subject to approach, particularly as in the past patients have been expected to get involved for free. Well, that's just not the case any longer. Patients can be and should be compensated for their time if regulations in your country allow. Various industry bodies and codes of practice are now making it easier for this to happen. And Patient-Focused Medicine's Development, PFMD, is currently running a public consultation on global principles for remunerating the patient community for interactions with the pharmaceutical industry. So if you're interested, I would definitely check that out. Broadly speaking though, what are the things to consider when compensating patients, when valuing them for their time? Firstly, look at the type of patient that you're engaging with. So look at the patient level on that pyramid. What is the scope of work that's involved in this project? And how much time is going to be involved? There should always be an agreement in place, and payment terms need to be short and also smooth. Now, the best partnerships that I've been in have really been multi-stakeholder ones, particularly where there is a combination of patient organisation, healthcare professionals, and industry involvement. At the end of the day, we all have different things as stakeholders to bring to the table, and we all have a vested interest to make the medicine's development life cycle more patient focused. So don't be afraid to have them all in the same room. And then what do I mean by fair? We've got fair next on the slide. Well, when it comes to patient partnerships, what I mean by fair is that you need to take into account that patients are trying to manage an illness. They're trying to live their life, often under difficult circumstances. So be realistic in terms of expectations. And that goes for patient partnerships when engaging with patients in, for example, the design of clinical trials, but also in the clinical trials themselves. So ask them what will make things easier for them to partner with you. If that means making meetings at a time that you wouldn't usually, because that's when they're at their most productive, so be it. For in-person activities, you might have to arrange overnight accommodation. Make sure that accessibility needs are catered for. And by that, I don't just mean for wheelchair users. There's lots of hidden disabilities which people still need to have accessibility for. And make sure that you're getting diversity of representation. I will be speaking about that in a bit. These are all things that, yes, can be challenging, but they need to be addressed in order to ensure fair partnership. And finally, there is transparency. And this is about being open from start to finish about what's involved in the engagement. It's about having things in writing, in understandable language, so that patients know what is involved in the engagement. It's really important that patients know what's expected of them and what they can expect from you as an organisation. It's about ensuring that people are kept informed of what's happening. Now, I do entire workshops on this topic, so what I've given here really is a brief overview. I've also put some useful links at the one side of this slide at the bottom. The IMI paradigm link will take you to a patient engagement toolbox that's aimed at various stakeholders within the healthcare journey. It contains tools to help in the planning, conduct, and the reporting and evaluation of patient engagement. So hopefully you might find some of these useful and also interesting to look at. Now we're going to look at where do we find these patients? And this is a question that I'm often asked by organisations. You know, the willingness is there often to partner with patients, but sometimes organisations just don't know where to start looking. There are lots of places, traditional and emerging. One of the emerging places is patient networks. Now, these are networks that bring together patients either from a single disease area or from different disease areas. And it gives you access to a large pool of potential partners. So some examples include We Go Health, Upati, Health Unlocked, Lifebulb. There's many out there. There's also vendors such as patient engagement companies and medcoms agencies, and they can also find patients for you depending on the project. The great thing about these is that they will often find the most suitable patients for you. Sometimes, though, you won't have direct contact with the patients themselves, as the vendor can act as a middleman. So sometimes it can make it difficult to build a direct long-term relationship. So you need to decide and think about what it is that you want. And then we have social media. And the important things to ask here are basically which channel is the most appropriate for who you're looking for. If you're looking for a pro patient, so those patients right at the top of the pyramid, then LinkedIn would be a more appropriate place to look than, for example, TikTok. But if you're looking for someone to, for example, create engaging content for a disease awareness campaign post-approval, then TikTok might be a good place. It can also be useful to consider which hashtags to follow as well. So there are certain hashtags that lots of patient leaders use in order to say that, hey, I'm a patient advocate, I'm a patient leader. So things like patient leader, patient-centric, patient engagement, some of those are some of the useful hashtags to follow. And then some of the other places include patient associations and patient groups. It's quite a traditional way of finding patients to partner with. You have to remember though, and I have mentioned this, that engaging with an individual patient isn't the same as engaging with one of the group's representatives and or members of staff, because they may not have lived experience of the condition. So if that's what you're looking for, you do have to bear that in mind. You also have to consider which patients you're trying to reach, because many patient groups also have problems, like many organisations, in reaching underserved communities. And then you also have events like this. Many conferences, webinars and meetings are including patients and patient advocates in their speaking faculty. Some conferences have a dedicated patient engagement track. Others are entirely dedicated to patient engagement. And then finally, there's word of mouth and recommendations. Now, people often ask me how I've managed to build such an extensive network of partners and large portfolio of work. And word of mouth and recommendations has played a big part in this. Ask your colleagues, look for recommendations on LinkedIn, talk to patient advocates. I often help organisations to identify the right patients for their projects because I know the communities. I would like to add here that if you're based in a country where the patient advocacy structure isn't mature, both in terms of patient advocates and also patient organisations, it's always worth considering tapping into the expertise of people outside of your geographic area. I've worked with organisations in lots of different countries because it can be beneficial for them and also for us to learn from what is being done in other places and how patient-centeredness is being embedded and moving forward in other places. Now, patients and decentralization and what patient-centered clinical trials look like is a whole topic within itself. We've seen that industry can adapt, and actually hybrid and decentralized trials are what patients themselves want. A recent survey which was undertaken by Kientis, which I was also involved in, and involved over 1,000 patients, mainly in the US and Europe, including the UK, showed that 89% of those surveyed would prefer their next clinical trial to be home-based or hybrid, and only 11% wanted a site-based trial. Interestingly, when age was taken into account, this trend remained the same, which really challenged the assumption that the older you are, the less likely you are to embrace new ways of doing things. Now, by bringing more choice to patients and giving them the option of having more of the trial at home, access can be widened to a larger section of the patient population. Now, this is especially the case for people whose illness might make it harder for them to travel to a trial site, for people who work and can't take lots of time off, people who just don't live close to a trial site. In my own personal situation, I've been offered clinical trials in the past, but I've had to turn them down because the site is just too far away, and participating would not only involve me taking too much time off work, but it would also involve a bigger burden on my caregivers because they would need to take me to the trial site. So they would also need to take time off work, take time out of their lives in order to take me to participate in a clinical trial. Decentralization can offer a solution to this. We do need to remember, though, that decentralized or hybrid trials aren't necessarily suitable for everyone, and some people do prefer to visit a trial site. Ascertain what your target patient population wants ahead of designing the trial. There's some good arguments for a more a la carte style of running a trial where patients are offered options so that the trial fits around them. This can help to improve recruitment and retention because the trial burden is reduced. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted the health disparities that we've always known have existed, and also the importance of involving a more diverse patient population in the medicine's development life cycle, particularly in clinical trials. But we need to ask ourselves, what do we mean by diverse? We need to go right to the very beginning. Now, the pandemic has particularly placed focus on race, ethnicity, and age. Now, these are incredibly important, but they're not the only factors to consider. We also need to look at gender, physical and mental disability, rural versus urban, socioeconomic status, education and health literacy, and digital literacy. Geographic diversity. We know that often the clinical trial sites are always in the same places, so we need to look at a wider geographic area. We need to know that medicines are going to work and be safe for different patient populations. We need to work to reduce the barriers to participation so that we get more patients engaging in clinical research. So this might mean, as I said, going to new clinical trial sites, reviewing information that is being provided to patients, building relationships with new community and patient organisations, as well as with patient leaders from those underserved communities. We need to improve the diversity of clinical trial research staff, ensure equitable access to digital tools, provide stipends for things like travel and childcare. It means that it's important to improve how and to what extent the patient voice is heard when designing clinical trials, because how else will you know what these challenges are and how they can be addressed? So we need to create opportunities that allow for a greater variety of patients to be involved in patient engagement. So this might mean using novel recruitment methods, further utilising virtual environments, accommodating for cultural factors, linguistic factors, looking at travel and reimbursement policies to ensure that patients aren't out of pocket when they're engaging with your organisation. A good starting point, I would say, is involve a diverse set of high-level patient advocates in helping you to develop more equitable patient engagement opportunities. In doing this, we will hopefully move towards more diverse participation in clinical research and more relevant and targeted treatments. So thank you for listening. This brings me to the end of my presentation. It's really been a very top-level overview of how we can move towards a more patient-centred future for the clinical trials arena. I hope that you found it interesting, and like I mentioned before, please do connect with me. I'm now very happy to answer questions if you have them, so thank you.
Hi, Trishna. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. It was really very interesting. I hope you have also enjoyed the event, and thank you so much for being here. We are glad to have you, and thank you for your time and effort you took to share your expertise with us. I'll ask the audience that if they have any question, they can ask you in the QA session or in the chat. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Stay safe. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, hope you have enjoyed the wonderful session of Trishna. And our next presenter is Begonia Nefria, who is a patient engagement in research coordinator from St. Joan Research Foundation, and she's with us. Let's welcome her. Hi, Begonia, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I perfect. Now it's working also, I think, the camera. Okay.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm fine. And you?
That's good. I'm good too. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here. It's very good to have you here with us. And thank you for joining us. You can start your presentation now by sharing your screen.
Yes, thank you so much. It's my
Thank you.
pleasure to be with all of you. I have been invited to talk about the digitalization of clinical trials, and my area of expertise is in pediatrics. As you have mentioned, my professional role is as a patient engagement and research coordinator at Sant Joan de Déu Children's Hospital in Barcelona, in Spain. And my role is under the umbrella of the clinical trials unit in our hospital, and also under the umbrella of the innovation department. It means that we are, very close to the needs to the patients, but also very close to the needs of the sponsors and to the future, that it's coming about the digitalization of specific parts of the clinical trials in some cases with this specific group of population that are the children and the young people. Said this, as you can imagine, from the site perspective and in general, what we are facing at this moment, it's a very exponential growth of the number of the trials, but also it means more complexity. And it means, in some cases, which is good, but have different, studies for the same conditions. And when we talk about pediatric diseases, mainly we are working about rare diseases. It means, in some cases, very few patients in one site. We need to involve patients from other regions of the same country or from abroad. And in this sense, digitalization, it can bring, opportunities to make more friendly the experience to involve the patients in these studies. Said this, it's important to have in mind that when we talk about pediatric clinical trials, we are referring to a specific target of population that always we said that they are not small adults. There is a specific, environment to involve the children and the young people in clinical trials, because at the end, what we are involving is the whole family. In most cases, the father or the mother, one of them decides to, skip the job that it's doing to fully dedicate time to take care of the kid. And if the kid is involved, in a clinical trial, it means more medical appointments, and it's a fully 24 hours dedication to take care of the child. Said this also, specifically talking about rare diseases, in some cases and with a very high percentage, we are referring about conditions that they don't have an approved treatment. It means that clinical trials, it's an opportunity to take care of these kids and see if the treatment is working. It's a very altruistic, collaboration to science, because at the end, in some cases, the last beneficiaries, if the drug is approved, probably are not the kids that finally are part of the study, are the future ones. And another point to take into account is that most of these conditions only affect the pediatric population. It means that it's very, very important to have pediatric studies for children and young people. There are, many things that we need to consider when we involve children and young people. It's not the same, to involve a very young child and if we involve a teenager patient. And we need to take into account this holistic approach because at the end, no, the impact to be in a trial, as I said, no, affect the whole family. The childs, no, are in the school. There are many things to consider that in some ways, thanks to the technology, we can adjust and improve. But we need not to have this very holistic approach when we design these studies, and also when we have on mind to include digitalization of these trials. This is only to remember to all of you that when we involve a child in a pediatric study, at the end, it's the whole family who takes part of this study. Relevant data for us, it's the real world of these studies. At this moment, we are working from the clinical care with only 50% of the drugs that we prescribe for children that have been studied with this group of population, and 90% when we refer to the neonates. This is only to highlight about the importance to have more clinical trials for the pediatric population, but also consider that we need to facilitate their participation and to provide the better experience as we can. There are many obstacles that we need to face when we involve children and young people in these trials. This is only a very high highlight level slide, but my point here is that in some cases we have trials that they came from the adult setting, because in the European context we need to perform pediatric investigational plans, but before to implement these studies we need to consider if are necessary adjustments, because as I said, an adult clinical trial design probably it's not the best one for the pediatric population. Said this, the centralized clinical trials or the digitalization of clinical trials bring many opportunities to make more comfortable the experience of the patients. We have different versions of the concept of decentralized clinical trials or digitalization. And at the end, from the pediatric perspective, that it's the area that I know usually when we have done advisory activities with patients and families, they prefer the option to choose, and not always it's a common decision between all the participants. Usually they prefer to travel to the clinical trial site in terms, to have the medical appointments, but for the specific activities, sometimes, if the family is not living in the area of the hospital, of the site, they, assess as a very positive to have digitalization tools. It depends of the trial, and in pediatrics it's not common, but talking about in general, we can find solutions for telemedicine. It's very well assessed when we can provide services at home, like the home nursing, anything related to the medical devices, because usually report answers, for example, in quality of life scales or patient reported outcomes. It's not the same experience doing in a paper copy format that if we do this using electronic tools, because it's a more friendly experience, not only to answer, because we can provide other complementary services such as reminders, see all the historical data that you have provided with these tools, etc. Something that is very well assessed for the patients in terms to ask for information, manage the calendar of the visits of the trial, and etc. It's to provide patient interactive portals. Also, anything related, if it's necessary, with the supply of the treatment or any other element of the study, it's very well assessed. And regarding the sample logistics, at the end, when we have in mind the idea to digitalize specific elements of a clinical trial protocol, the most important thing that we need to consider, and it's the goal of anything that we do in this setting, is to have in mind the patient and the family experience. Every study, and this is part of our experience, it's different. We have very, very complex clinical trials. We have other studies that probably are more easy to organize from the logistic point of view. We have studies that are very long because the patients, are involved for many years. and do this analysis and also getting the feedback and the opinion of the patients before to implement the clinical trial protocol. It's very useful because probably we identify for one study specific, tools that the patients and the families they assess very well, but for other study probably the preferences are different. This is another slide with a summary of the different tools that we can provide in a digital version. Time by time, what we are finding in some studies is the use of wearables to collect information about clinical data from the patients, and also integrate these tools in the devices that every of us will use, our mobile phone, or in some cases the tablet of the patients. What we need to consider, as I have mentioned, is that what is good for the pharma, what is good for the patients at the end, needs to provide us the right design of a patient-centric study. And my next slides will be very, very focused in the added value to involve children and young people in the design of these very innovative studies, in which we want to include, the digitalization of part of the processes and the tools. And what we need to have always on mind are the patients. And I like a lot this sentence because in some, industries, they spend a lot of time thinking in the process to analyze the needs of the patients, or in this case, the users or the customers. But in our settings, sometimes we forgot the patient until the right moment to be very close to them. And our approach is in the opposite side, thinking the patient from the very beginning, have on board the patient as a partner, because it can be very useful along the design and the performance of the clinical trial. And the most probably is that really with this approach we can design patient-centric studies. And I like a lot this sentence, that it's part of the advocacy movement around the world, not only in Europe, that it's anything that can matter the patient needs to be discussed and designed with the patients. This is a very nice slide that probably it's from the UPATI, this IMI project, that reflects in each moment of the clinical trial design and performance, which is the role of the patients. And I want to put this slide here to realize that the patients can be, as I have mentioned, along the whole process, with different roles and with a different impact. As soon we can involve obviously the patients, the better, because it's in the right moment to take decisions. And talking about the topic of this talk regarding the digitalization, this needs to be discussed in the very early stages of the design of the clinical trial, because late, in some cases, it's quite difficult or probably impossible to adjust or to include these tools. Specifically, when we talk about involved children and young people, we need to take into account different elements. One is that traditionally we have think that they are a vulnerable group of populations and they have been protected to be part of the studies. And I have mentioned children and young people, they have conditions that usually in the adult population we cannot find, and it makes sense obviously to have trials for them and to involve them, because they have rights. And one of the rights that they have is to have an active voice, an active role to take decisions in the health field. We need to consider the ethic principles that in any project of clinical research are, and in pediatrics, obviously, we have these principles and we need to consider them when we design these patient involvement activities. The risk-benefit to involve the patients and to see which is the best way to do it. It's so different than when we involve adults. And I have mentioned the rights that beyond to consider and recognize the right to be heard and to have this active voice, they need to receive the best quality in the healthcare and also in research, because in some cases a clinical trial, it can be the only opportunity to try to care the patients. We have a very big spectrum of different groups in pediatrics, because we have from the preterm newborns until the adolescents. And as you can imagine, in some cases, we cannot never involve directly the patients for the age or the condition, but always know there are the caregivers that usually are the parents that also we can involve them. I want to highlight this because if they can be represented directly by them in first person, it's the best approach. But in any case, there are the parents and the caregivers, and also they deserve to be listened in the design and in the performance of clinical trials. Also, as I have mentioned, we have different conditions. We can have conditions that the involvement is, complex. But if we can involve them, let's do it, because we need to consider the special needs of the patients and if we need to adapt anything. Another important element is that across Europe, there are, a big difference in some cases in the legal consent age. In Spain, usually we involve in clinical trials and also in patient involvement activities teenagers from 12 years and onwards. In other countries, it's a different age. But in any case, we need to consider this age when we involve in activities about clinical trials. As I said, consider the role of the parents or the legal guardians. And in some cases, the need of targeted treatment, it's relevant. We need to also consider the scenario in which this clinical trial is being performed and try not to discuss when necessary if it's part of the protocol design, the use of the placebo or not. Said this, in this slide, you can see the different, big areas in which we can involve the patients. There is very important in pediatrics, the awareness, and also talking about the digitalization of clinical trials. It's in some cases a matter of awareness, because in some cases when we listen telemedicine, it sounds very innovative, very new, complex, and probably what we can deliver. Sometimes the families, they understand that it's very different if they have a medical appointment. And now, after these 18, 20 months of COVID-19 pandemic, we have demonstrated that telemedicine works and is useful, and we avoid a lot of travels to the clinical trial site. Obviously, the involvement of patients in the design of the clinical trials is the most meaningful moment, because there we can take decisions about what we can decentralize, when we can provide digital tools, etc. Definition of recruitment strategies. We need to take into account the opinions of the parents or the patients, or talking in general about adult patients also. The consent process, the strategies for the adherence to retain the patients in the trials, and the follow-up. This is a more simple slide than the one that I have shown to you about the EUPATI, but it summarizes that patients can be involved along the whole process, and also the digitalization is around. And our approach is have these early discussions with the patients to design the best experience for them. And consider that still there are important concerns that even we can digitalize process and provide services at home, etc. Still, there are areas of improvements. In this slide, you can see that, for example, in general, and this came from a publication of 2011, but at this time when the big boundaries or areas of improvement in clinical trials were analyzed, these 3 points were relevant. The first one said that the 75% of the medical procedures that sometimes are in a clinical trial protocol affect the decision to participate, and not always these medical procedures are necessary. In the 33% of these medical procedures were not crucial for the drug approval. And the last data that we have here is that clinical trials, usually the 40% of them are amendment in prior to include the first patient. It means that sometimes we have elements regarding the design of the clinical trial protocol that if we have discussed and if we have included the patient perspective and the real world of the patients that we need to include in this study, probably we can save time and resources and avoid an amendment of the protocol. In general, when we talk about involve patients in clinical studies, we need to consider that we need resources to do this, because we need professionals to involve the patients. We need also to reimburse the patients, because they dedicate time, resources, and they deserve to be reimbursed. And there is a lot of time invested in these activities. But this slide summarizes the analysis of studies in the adult setting in this case, but demonstrates that an investment in this example of $100,000 has a big revenue for the study. And as I said, what is good for pharma, it's good for the clinical trial, and it's good for the patients. If we have in mind this triangle and we invest to include what is good for the patients, we can deliver these patient-centric studies, and obviously we can save time. That for the patients, I can confirm that it's really, really important, but we can also save resources and probably provide a better experience for the patients. And there are many areas in which we can involve the patients, but what I want to summarize from this slide is that if we put the patient in the heart of our project, probably there are very easy things that we can adjust that really have a big impact in the patients and in the families. Here you can see plenty of other opportunities to involve the patients. And I think that it's clear and that the role that they have, it's relevant, it's key. And for any of the studies, obviously, we cannot perform activities of patient involvement in the whole process sometimes, or all these activities, but we can do is an analysis before to design the clinical trial, and assess and decide where is relevant the feedback and the involvement of the patients. And said this regarding the digitalization of clinical studies, what is important is to involve them in the right moment, to take the decision if this is an advantage, or probably we are adding complexity to this study. And finally, and this is aligned with the previous presentation, I want to present to all of you different ways to involve the patients. Obviously, we can recruit patients through patients organizations. We can recruit patients from the clinical trial sites, but there are across Europe and across the world specific groups of young people that we have trained, and they are ready to be involved in activities about clinical trials. This is a photo about the group that we have in Sant Joan de Déu Children's Hospital. The name is Kids Barcelona. It's a young children's advisory group. We have at this moment 20 young people that every month they meet with the professionals of our hospital. And what we do with them is to discuss and improve projects related to clinical trials and innovation. This is the picture about the groups that we have across Europe, and we are organized in a network. The name is the European Young Persons Advisory Group Network. We have the recognition of Imprima, and in any project that the sponsors that contact us request to involve specific groups across Europe, what we have, it's a liaison person in these groups, and we work with the same project and methodology to involve the patients in these studies. And we have now expertise in many areas, definition of unmet medical needs when they can provide the perspective of adolescents, revision of protocols, also revision and validation of informed consents and patient information sheets, and educational materials. And this is my presentation. I'm open to questions, and you have here in the slide my email if you want to contact me afterwards. Thank you so much.
Hi, Peconia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for your wonderful session. And it was really very informative. And I'll ask the audience that if they have any questions, they can ask you in the QA session or in the chat. Okay.
Thank
you. So you need to just they will be asking the questions. So you just can, just need to check the chat session and the QA session, okay? Okay, so Nefria, Begonia, thank you so much for being here, and we are really honored to have you as a keynote speaker. So thank you so much. See you again. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye. So ladies and gentlemen, hope you have enjoyed the wonderful session of Begonia. And now our next presenter is Sylvia Keshigura, who is the project manager at Kilimo, and she is with us. Hi, Sylvia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
Fine, fine. You?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for asking. Okay, so Sylvia, thank you so much for joining this conference, and you can start your presentation by sharing your screen.
Okay, I will in a second. Okay. So are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I will make it the right size. Sorry. All right. Okay, that looks fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, great.
good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending this presentation. I'm here to present the activities of our CRO based in Italy. The name is Kilimo SRL. So our CRO is located in Bologna, which is a town in the northern part of Italy. You can see the skyline of the town in this nice picture with the two towers identifying our town all over the places. So it's a small size Italian CRO. I'm starting with the history just to give you a feeling on how we started working and what are our thoughts about clinical research and the way we work. So I am one of the founders, and I used to work as a CRA in the late 90s for a contract research organization. So when I work as CRA, I went outside and had the opportunity to get to know several investigators at different investigator sites. So when I was there for business, I also got the feeling that something was changing around. Actually, a new law decree in 2004 was released that gave the opportunity to investigator to run non-profit research in a more legally organized setting. So by having this initiative of our national government, investigators were allowed to have better funds to have funds for their research and other aspects that allow them to plan more easily their own research. But again, at that time, another thing happened that to the investigator is that they faced that that organizing a clinical trial was not really a simple issue. So it's not because those investigators would normally carry out clinical trials as a clinical site, but not as a sponsor. And so they also realized that they needed to face other tasks that are not typical of a clinical site, like monitoring and other things like that. So by having this, I decided to build my own company and provide services to this specific sponsor, this specific type of sponsor. So what happened in March 2008 and in November 2011, Again, we had other legal initiatives by Italian authority, AIFA, so that they declined the requirements for CROs, for monitors, or for auditors, for data management, to be enabled to provide services related to clinical trials. So in Italy, if you want to be a CRO, a monitor, or other professions listed here, for example, you need to have a minimum you need to respect the minimum requirement list that are set out by the law. So our company, Kilimo SRL, was founded in 2008 and started acting as a CRO in 2012. Our first trial was in infectious disease. Actually, many of my sites where I used to work as a CRA before funding my own CRO were in infectious diseases, and particularly in HIV. So our first trial was indeed in infectious disease. And time went on. We work as a CRO. You will see. I will describe later what we do and who we are. But then also our life as a CRO went on. So we have also been inspected by the Italian competent authority in 2020. So what we do, our focus is really on clinical operations. So we do the regulatory and monitoring in the Italian territory. We have also worked in other nations, like, for example, the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland, or a little bit in the UK as well, but that's a minor involvement that we have in those countries. Our main focus is really in Italy. We are working according to the current regulation, so the Clinical Trial Directive. So we do submissions for Competence Authority Ethics Committee, we do contract negotiations and other aspects related to clinical trial startup in Italy. As a matter of fact, as most of the people know already, there is a new regulation coming into force on 31st of January 2022. So we are also training to be ready to do submissions on that setting, but are also aware that for 1 year the submission under the old setting, and that is the directive, are still allowed. So we will have a period where both will work. Our site selection is one aspect that we really care about, also because we might work in an international setting, and we are asked to look into our country and advise sites, advise anything that relates specifically to Italy in clinical trials. So we have developed some ideas, I would say really not a structured method, but ideas to select investigators, not going just by the key opinion leaders, which is, they're great, probably, they have wonderful and big sites, but we also look for emergent sites. An opportunity to grow. So we're looking for people that are into the big trials, but they still have a good scientific activity in clinical trials of their specialty. So we look for those people to give them an opportunity to grow, to give them an opportunity to be known by the sponsors, and also for the sponsor to look for people that are also very motivated to take part to the clinical trials. Of course, we do monitoring activities, so that's typical site initiations, interim monitoring visits, and closeout. So the big challenge is not only since COVID, but even earlier, that we are really living now in a hybrid system, as I heard from many presentations this morning and early this afternoon. And so the challenges here is really to work efficiently and with quality in this new setting. So while it is quite easy to do site initiations and close out remotely. So that's saving time, and that's saving also cost for the sponsor. Interim monitoring, especially source document verification, is not really easy in our experience up to now, and of course there are good reasons for this, so that's something that may be changing in the long run, but there are also good reasons for that not being so easy at the moment. We're still we work very much with centralized monitoring, support of that with the support of data management and all other professionals. We are implementing methods to perform a robust set of centralized monitoring activities that go along with the standard monitoring visits. So this is more or less how we are organized. We have a company director, then a scientific director linked to the quality assurance directly, 2 project managers, 1 person for IT, 2 person taking care of regulatory, 6 monitors, and 1 clinical trials assistant. So as I said, we are really a small CRO. So our staff, how do we select them? So project managers, monitors, and clinical trial assistants are primarily selected amongst people who have experience in clinical trials from different perspectives. And so it might be that a monitor is someone who used to be a study coordinator, or like a project manager, someone who used to be a CRA in another setting. But it's very important that those people are also very passionate to their job, so that this allows for us a low turnaround of staff and better relationship within the company, and longer relationships as well. One point that is also important geographically for Italy, on how Italy is distributed with the mountains in the length of the booth, and so it's very important that also geographically the monitor choose to have the shortest possible travel time to the sites, in order to reduce the stress that can affect their working performances and job retention. So it might be that 100 kilometers one way will be pretty easy, 1 hour or so on, and 100 kilometers through the mountains is really maybe a 3 hours drive. So we try to be careful also to reduce the impact of traveling by having an equal distribution of traveling amongst the monitor, and not that being too much to take too much of their life, their private life. Quality assurance, as a matter of fact, we are obliged by the law to have a quality assurance responsible person. So this person follows compliance of the company, and particularly the staff, with the current legislation. In particular, as I said, there is a set requirement to do the profession of CRAs, for example, but others as well. And also there is a set amount of days on-site visit that you need to perform each year to be qualified for the next year, and also a set amount of hours of training that you need to have each year to continue performing the profession in the following year. So having said that, that's set by the law, it is indeed possible to interrupt the profession and start again, but then there is also a set of rules for being retrained and being updated after, with some flexibility on the CRO part, or whoever hires the professional on making this plan. As I mentioned, that we will also have a legal and financial assistant. Those people are our consultant for legal and financial matters, so less linked to the clinical operation work. The IT person is here to help us carrying out our work. So our staff is provided with standard equipment. So like they have a laptop, scanners, and a smartphone. And we also have a centralized platform with backup to store the documentation, which is mostly what we do every day, you know, and that's our business, to have good documentation per GCP. So we have a common platform to do that. So the IT person takes care, of course, of the good functioning, the updates of the system, and of course the regulatory compliance of the system itself. So this is something I just want to mention, that although we had to stop our in-person meeting, in-house meetings during the pandemics, we used to have a meeting in-house every 3 months, because a lot of people are located in the field and not in-house. And being a small company, we do need to meet each once in a while, so that people can share their work and life associate experiences. So during the meetings, we also try to have the people do some of the trainings that is required. For training, we use both internal and external resources. We have selected, in particular, a group of vendors for this special task that provide services internationally. And this is one of the progress that has been implemented with the pandemics. I have a feeling that the web-based services are now much better than they used to be before. So that allows us to have very high quality training and to be up to date. Our clients, so here I will just describe what type of clients we work with and we have worked with in the past. So since the very start, as I mentioned before, we used to work with non-commercial sponsors. So most of them being investigators that obtain funds to support, to run their design trials, or sometimes foundations running non-profit trials. Working in the non-commercial world has led our company to act as a support for organizational needs of the sponsor, especially when the sponsor was an investigator. In fact, the organization within a non-commercial sponsor is not as well defined as it is in a commercial setting. So there is a lot of work to do beforehand, before starting the study, to assign roles and responsibility, and also to provide an adequate documentation to be able to carry out the trial according to GCP, of course. Of course, you know, this happened mostly when the trial was run with the investigator, not really with the foundation, where the settings are pretty much well defined as well with foundations. We have participated as a CRO to international and national non-commercial trials. And when our involvement was in international trials, we conducted the section that involved mainly our country under the sponsor general coordination. So we tried to link, we had to link with the sponsor organization. So our other type of client is also other CROs. So our clients, in fact, have been other CROs with a regional organization that did not cover sufficiently Italy. So in such cases, we have often been the local CRO, while the larger CRO would be the lead of the clinical trial. We have set up for this reason, a quality system so that it can be integrated with the one of a different CRO. And in this type of a specific type of collaboration, we assign, in any case, a project manager with the purpose of integrating the processes of the other CRO with our CRO, and provide an overview of the harmonization of the activities, so that our CRAs are still qualified and they are still meeting our company targets. we're working with other CROs, and that happens mostly internationally. We conducted both commercial and non-commercial trials. One big focus, of course, when we work internationally is the adaptation of the documentation to Italian regulation, but not only that, also to give advice of what is the status of some aspects of clinical trials in Italy. So, and that is mostly linked to patient management, like we are asked to do adaptation for informed consent, but also we are asked questions on how compensation for traveling works, or compensation for time dedicated to the trial participation, how it is set up by the law, what type of consent are we provided to pediatric patient, what range of age, for example, which is always a little bit different on any country. And of course, the traveling, that's a big issue. I heard very nice presentation before. Unfortunately, I must say we have very limited possibility to provide compensation, both for traveling and for time dedicated to clinical trial participation. But I hope this will change in the future. So, what type of therapeutic field we have worked on? As a company, as I said, we have started with HIV, and I must say I very much like working on HIV trials. We continue to have trials in infectious diseases, including recently we started a COVID-19 therapeutic trial in Italy. We have also performed trials in hematology, in lymphoma particularly, in advanced therapies, so therapies that would involve bone marrow transplant and oligonucleotides, in neurology, insomnia, in intensive care, the cerebral aneurysm rupture, cardiovascularly, hypertension, and also endocrinology. So, like you can see that some of those trials, like oligonucleotides, for example, those are very advanced therapies, and they are investigator-initiated. The one trial on bone marrow, for example, was company-initiated, but like had only very few sites all over the world. So, like one in Italy and maybe one or two in the UK and a few in the USA. So those trials are really the ones that have a very high scientific impact, while other studies are more normal studies with several sites in the country, and yes, multi-center trials in Italy. So the phases of the trials, as you can imagine, some of those trials were phase 1, but you know, it ranges from phase 1 to phase 4. We have done any type of phase of trial. So in addition to this, of course, our people in the company have profiles that they have more experience in several other therapeutic fields that are not listed here, of course, because we don't have that as a company in a whole. So in addition to clinical trials, we also performed a few observational studies in our life as a company. Observational studies in Italy fall under a different legislative setting compared to clinical trials. It's much less restrictive. So if you work under the umbrella of the legislation of clinical trials, you may as well be able to carry out observational studies. So even for those studies, we did one in cardiology on myocardial infarction, very nice and in-depth study, and another one in endocrinology in achondroplasia. Also in those studies, we did both the regulatory and the monitoring. As you can see here, we also have a few trials and observational studies that included minors. So that's again a very nice challenge, and very nice to work with the site of pediatricians that are normally very well organized and more than the standards. The patient association is very important. There's a big involvement of the families as well. So that's very nice setting to conduct a clinical trial. As a CRO, we have a quality system and plans for our system to be reviewed periodically and also by external experts. So we do have external audits periodically. We are currently, where do we work in terms of quality, where we try to improve in terms of quality? We are currently committed to improve methods of centralized monitoring, believing in fact that a combination of on-site visits and centralized monitoring is most efficient to achieve better quality in clinical trials. To be honest, I saw today in the presentation a lot of this centralization, meaning that patient will attend sites the least possible and so on. But that implies also a lot of work beforehand, and involvement of several stakeholders beforehand to keep the quality of clinical trials, keep the documentation, keep the data in the correct place. So it's a big challenge of this, also regarding electronic support and so on. I think we have several, our legislation has several steps to take to prepare a better setting to work in this in the new world. Also, what we work on at the moment to improve is also the risk-based approach to all aspects of the clinical trials that affect our profession. So what is the future? As I said, the future will involve a lot of stakeholders at earlier stage of clinical trials, especially in the development of the protocol, in the setting of the protocol, before we go to the ethics committee, before we go to search for patient. And the reason for this is with having a decentralized setting and keeping the quality, this requires a lot of thoughts and a lot of minds before the clinical trial is in fact implemented. So this is something that we, as a mindset we have when we work with the investigators on non-commercial trials. And now it's something that even differently applies also to perhaps commercial trials as well. So our hope is to continue to grow and allow our staff to grow with the company and enjoy the activities and challenges of working in the evolving world of clinical trials. And yeah, this is my last slide. So sorry, I think I was a little bit shorter maybe than the time allowed to me. So I just want to thank you everyone for listening, and don't hesitate, of course, to contact me or anyone at our company. We have our email here and our telephone number here. And I am happy to answer any question you might have now as well. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting today. Thank you.
Hi, Sylvia. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. It was really very interesting. And thank you so much for your time. You took to share your expertise with us. And we are honored to have you. And we are looking forward to work again with you. And I'll ask the audience that if they will be having any question, they can ask you in the Q&A session or in the chat. Okay?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay safe. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, our next presenter now is Frank Liu. He's working.
My name is Frank Liu. I'm Novapeutics and Biopharm Matrix, and a lot of information gathered here are done through Biopharm Matrix. So today I'd like to talk about blockchain in clinical trials. And before I start the presentation, I would like to thank the conference organizer, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about this topic. I've been talking and presenting information about blockchain in drug development overall, and this specific presentation will be focusing more on how you can have implication clinical trials for the past 3-4 years. When I started it, I see blank looks in most audience face, but as I start to present more and with time progress, I see the understanding increase. But still, there just seems to a very broad misconception of how blockchain is working in drug development, and also the lack of understanding of its importance. So I hope that through this presentation, I'll be able to convince you that it is not the future. It's actually now, and there are bits and pieces in various organizations. The fast adapters are actually already exploring a way to do it. But my view on blockchain clinical trials will have to do with the consensus architecture that inevitably at some point that it's going to happen, and that will then really make the whole process efficient, and that could save cost and time for all stakeholders involved. For you who are not familiar with what blockchain is, just to kind of give you something to kind of compare to is the you probably hear it every day now today is the Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a very fundamental start of the blockchain architecture. Mostly used for digital finance money. It's a digital money and a cryptocurrency. So what it does is it adds, it's a ledger. It's like a blocks of transactional data that's string together, and it has to be approved. At this point, the approved protocol is by decentralized computing participants, and it's done by proof of work. Basically, each participant has to show that to prove that you can answer a certain question to show that it's a worthy participant, and the one that gets approved and to be participate, I call the miners, and the miners get a little kickback on the fee that the transaction incurred. So the idea with that is to achieve certain kind of consensus in a decentralized fashion. And that's why we kind of want to bring into the clinical trial and drug development. The reason for that is that you add trust into the data, that each data being generated in real time by real-time instrumentation, by real-time actions, by real-time examinations by the clinician, or whatever it is that required to put valuable data in the chain. Now, with this blockchain architecture, it can rapidly be shared with stakeholders in a way that we know that the data being generated, its authenticity has been validated. So that's basically what this presentation is going to be about. And so without further kind of introduction to the topic of blockchain, I'm going to move on to the second slide.
So my opening statement, in kind of not summarize, but really to present the idea to you, is that our industry is really heading to a real-time tracking with all stakeholders having the access to an immutable database at our fingertips. What that means is that every step away, the drug or the active ingredients that we ship, it has to be tracked to the best we can in real time. So there are going to be a lot of instrumentations. There's going to be a lot of security around that, and a lot of information will be produced. And with all those information being produced and data being produced. The important thing is to have a trustworthy database. And from time to time, I'm gonna just talk about the concept of immutable database and what is the latest technology that kind of come about to support that. So briefly about the overall pharma landscape is that we are looking in a rapidly shrinking numbers of big pharma in the past, say, 20 years. There are many large deals over the past 20 years that's shrinking 60 pharma to less than just 10 today. And just last year, we talking about Bristol Myers Squibb deal with Celgene, Allergan buying Actavis, and Takeda with Shire, so you're talking about big pharmas are coming together, and essentially the goal is to save costs hopefully by increasing efficiencies in the drug developmental process. So outsourcing research and development activities have been up as a result of mergers, acquisition, and investments in early biotechnologies. It's all designed to keep core competencies within companies to manage the contract workforce, while reducing internal development efforts to save costs and increase efficiency. Drug research and development costs and process. Currently, a snapshot of that would be discovery and development of safe and effective drugs. It's a challenging undertaking that can take 10 to 15 years and cost $1 to $1.5 billion. And the drug developmental process requires sophisticated technology and a broad array of medical and laboratory expertise, which include disease target identification, preclinical evaluation, toxicology and safety testing, clinical trial design and implementation. And roughly for every 5,000 to 10,000 potential compounds that are evaluated, ultimately only one receives approval from the FDA. And current trial process has high friction existed among clinical trial stakeholders. Stakeholders' cooperation in clinical trials entail multiple challenges, such as rising costs and lack of a secure, systematic approach for data management. So the good news about all this mergers, acquisition, and reduction of big pharma is that it's increased numbers of contract research organizations, and by having this surge, itself enhances the democratization of drug innovations. But the cost really hasn't been reduced as I think that everyone anticipated with the advent of technologies and the business processes and the drug developmental processes. And actually it has been going up. So one of the aspects of the idea is to increase efficiencies by having a good data infrastructure. And essentially the idea is that the trust value within the data, integrity within data has to be high. And if we can build from the start high, then the friction will be much less. So basically the effective tools as such just mentioned are needed to enhance efficient stakeholders collaboration by sharing data that have trust building. So you can see that the chart, the graph on the right is that the y-axis symbolizes the trust value. Meanwhile, the x-axis is the due diligence required. It takes time, money, and effort, and as more due diligence it's involved, you have increased trust value. And if we can't have information from the ground up that's already up high in trust value, then naturally we're talking about a large reduction of the saving the cost, time, and money. So the big picture is really about democratizing data. So you have a centralized internet, data storage kind of architecture currently existing, such as YouTube, Amazon, Google, etc. And then you have the decentralized type of data setting, such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, ICOs, which stands for Initial Coin Offering, which most of the time these ICOs are built on smart contracts that piggyback of Ethereum platform. But there are other platforms also provide smart contracts, which then allows ICO to be formed. Those deserve many hours of conversation or a discussion or talk. So I would just kind of mention it here. So the initial purpose of the internet was to store and retrieve information through a centralized server and interface. The current technology and protocol designed to store and track this type of data haven't evolved much since the early days of the internet. Cloud has been the buzz tech for the past decade. Next, blockchain as the potential to democratize data by dramatically enhance how we interact by intrinsically building trust that's immutable in data storage performed in real time. And it's a robust sharing database structure. So essentially, blockchain is really a hyperledger spreadsheet that's stored in decentralized clouds. And I will explain a little more below, is that transactional records are created and are validated globally by decentralized participating computers in the network called miners. And the disputed nature of the ledger makes it impossible to make simultaneous changes to all copies of the ledger, and it's a further safeguard against both internal and external attacks. Therefore, validated transactions are permanently and immutably stored. The owner of the transaction has the power to move anything of value freely and instantaneously without borders of intermediaries. And examples of blockchain applications have been widely used today in financial transactions, medical records, land titles, crowdfunding, healthcare, supply chain, and etc. Blockchain components. This distributed ledger, which stores data and housed on the system of all trusted parties in the network. Public/private key cryptography. The key controls information access that has been encrypted onto the blockchain, providing access to data while simultaneously validating their identity. Consensus. This is the mechanism by the participating parties in the blockchain network to validate that data being placed on the blockchain is from a trusted source. Participants using a cryptographic proof. For example, proof of work or proof of stake. Then you have the smart contract. These are executable pieces of code that perform a function, such as issuing payment or transferring documents, when the conditions of transactions are met. Now, current clinical trial supply chain. 3 key components is to tracing products in the shipping package, 2, verifying the correct data is collected, 3 is validating that the study site remains blinded. So these core qualities that blockchain can be helpful in the trials is that under the concept of traceability, the chain between the clinical study sponsor, study patient, and site is long and involved the use of multiple IT systems. In a world where all parties involved are linked by a blockchain, it would be possible to leverage encryption and access control so that the trusted participants could get confirmation of the receipt of the product without having access to protected patient information, and in turn provides the ability to validate patient identity. 2. Verify completion. By introducing smart contracts, the entire clinical trial process can benefit from using blockchain technology. The process trial milestones can serve as stage gates for the smart contract. The process will only proceed beyond that point when required actions are completed and correct. 3. Validation. Before the initiation of a clinical trial, sponsors submit the parameters of the study to the appropriate regulatory authorities and various ethics committees at the trial sites. Then, at the study's conclusion, the sponsor's regulatory affairs department determines if all requirements have been fulfilled before accepting and then forwarding the results to the appropriate regulatory authorities for approval. And then, the challenge that faces sponsors and regulators is how to ensure the validity of the data and to establish universal standards for that process. The implementation of blockchain technology can ensure such standards are implemented, since the validation of every transaction is an integral part of the technology. Now let's look at the current state of data storage and flow in clinical trials. The regulatory audits and validation of the study findings and results is a slow, expensive, and labor-intensive activity. The introduction of the blockchain could overcome this inefficiency, as organizations can quickly demonstrate data validity due to the immutability of the records collected and the fact the authorities' specifications were incorporated and executed by the smart contracts existing in blockchain implemented as part of that solution. Regulatory considerations could be satisfied once traceability, verified completion, and validation are met with high confidence using blockchain. How blockchain could add value at the following trial steps. These are the examples, such as going from the active pharmaceutical ingredients, API, sourcing, to packaging, to storage and shipping, and to patient. API sourcing is an essential element of a clinical study, ensuring that there is sufficient supply of the API for the trial. Therefore, multiple plants may be used because the drug is at an early stage of the development life cycle. The productivity of plants is less predictable, and the risk of having an insufficient supply could be mitigated by making available real-time inventory to the study stakeholders, both up and downstream. This can be accomplished by having the information recorded and updated on a clinical study blockchain. Packaging. With the investigational drug product and comparator supply source secure, the next stage in the clinical supply chain is packaging. The creation of smart packaging, which is merging the physical and digital worlds, can generate new data for the sponsor to use. Not only can an organization encode the identity of the product, allowing for traceability, but additional sensors can collect data from the moment the treatment is placed inside the package. All of this information can then be recorded to the blockchain to create a complete record of a medication journey throughout the clinical study. Storage and shipping. authenticate the ownership and property of the drugs in a fast-moving environment with ease. When we enable smart packaging for drugs in shipment and storage, a more interesting picture emerges, where all products down to the individual level can be located with their conditions assessed. This also increases the assurance of authenticity during the trial. In later larger scale production, similar serialization and tracking techniques across a trusted blockchain empowered network can prevent counterfeit and or defect products from entering the supply chain to the patient. The ultimate purpose of a clinical trial is to track patients' responses to the investigational drug. At the end of the clinical supply chain, the data is provided to the sponsor for further analytics and analysis. It is evident that the three core qualities of a blockchain model also improve the quality of data collected, along with its word origination. So to kind of sum up what we just talked about is on blockchain in clinical trials. Blockchain technology could positively impact clinical trial supply chain by improving the traceability of medications from active pharmaceutical ingredients to patient in real time. It has a built-in trust system due to crypto key and developed consensus systems. This facilitates the gathering of patient-level data in a HIPAA-compliant manner. This is done by having patients and other individuals participating in the network record data to the blockchain, which can move the information to appropriate systems and groups in access to review the data. The data is auditable, trackable, immutable, and can help create a longitudinal records of a patient health status. The validating nature of this technology will no doubt benefit the patient, sponsor, and all stakeholders, eliminating frictions and hopefully cost and time. So this is an illustration quickly. I'm sorry I'm short on time. Apologize for that. So this is a centralized, traditional clinical trial database flow. Sit in the center, a coordinating center. On the bottom, the information flowing from the PI, from the subjects, and then you distribute in almost parallel fashion, but not always in terms in sync. So, and then decentralized database structure that can be communicated in real time in a robust manner is that everyone is connected in a way that information can be shared and distributed in real time. However, the stakeholders that at each juncture that are relevant to that should be exposed to information will be allowed to do it, and this can be coded through a smart contract for permission.
So when the major stakeholders that are connected through permission and by design embedded with contingencies in the smart contract, you create a pharma supply chain that has built-in compliance, and that compliance is fortified by the architecture of blockchain which enhance trust in the system. So what that translates to is pharma supply chain in the drug development has been in a desperate need for better exchange of expeditious, trusted real-time data in order to reach its maximal systematic efficiency. And the challenge is not only to create better infrastructure to manage the supply chain, but also to comply with a standard that's required for safety, efficacy, and approval. All this adds up to its enhanced time, reduced costs in getting data and share with the relevant stakeholders, and eventually increase the confidence in regulators when they look at this data, knowing that it's highly unlikely tempered and everything they see have been viewed by stakeholders who are relevant to each stage of the drug development. And with that, basically enhance the ability of the system to eliminate counterfeit drugs and increase the comprehensible visibility of the whole process. And also, it definitely strengthens this whole development ability to be regulatory compliant. And overall, it has a good control and enhanced control over the shipping for temperature and time-sensitive active pharmaceutical ingredients.
So, with great promise, blockchain technology has many advantages in security, data protection, and ability to bridge the disparate systems that manufacturers, CROs, and study sites utilize. This technology has the benefit of immediate information access without having all the data located in one place, thus making it less vulnerable to external and internal attacks. A combination of process serialization and blockchain technology holds the key to ensuring clinical trials integrity to overcome multiple challenges. It provides an assurance that missing in the industry today by leveraging technology and knowledge of tomorrow. So Warren Buffett famously said that when hiring someone, you're looking for three things, generally in the person: intelligence, energy, and integrity. And if they don't have the last one, integrity, don't even bother with the first two. So I like to take that same principle and apply it to building a database. When constructing a database, you're looking for three things. Generally in a database, you're looking for immutability, robustness, and integrity. And if they don't have the last one, which is integrity, don't even bother with the first two. And that will be my concluding remark. And I'd like to thank you for listening in. And if you have any questions, I think that I have gone over time. Please don't hesitate to contact me by email. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day and stay safe.
So hello everyone. Thank you so much for Frank's wonderful presentation. I hope you all of you have enjoyed this session. And if you want to contact Frank, he just gave you his number and email address. But if you still need further details, you can contact me. I'll drop you all the details. And thank you so much for being here with us and for adding value. And now, as you know, that this has been a wonderful conference. I have enjoyed listening to the talks from our valued keynote speakers, and it is a privilege and honor to be entrusted with such an undertaking at a gathering of such eminent people from different parts of the world. So thank you so much to our esteemed presenters for their valuable point of view. And now we have reached to the end of our conference. On behalf of Platinum Global Solutions, I would like to thank all the stakeholders, including speakers, sponsors, and delegates, without whom this conference would not have been possible. So I extend my best wishes to you all. We will be back with novel themes in the coming months in the field of clinical trials. Have a nice day. Stay safe. See you soon. Yes, we will upload all the presentation and the complete video on YouTube channel, and then we will be sharing the link with you. Some of our presenters have shared the slides. I will share it with you. Thank you so much. Stay safe.